The Edmonton Oilers on the verge of advancing to the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs for the third consecutive year, and all three times would come at the expense of the LA Kings. To discuss that, let's hold to Edmonton right now and bring in Ryan Rishaug and insider Pierre LeBrun. All right, guys, we all know it's really significant, very important to get off to a good start, specifically so when you're playing against a team like the LA Kings that's got that great 1-3-1-D. They're really strong defensively when they can use that D. They were top three in the entire NHL when they can use that D. But, Ryan, once you give up the first goal of the game, suddenly you have to change your entire defensive format.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely pulls them out of their comfort zone for sure, Gino. When you're the LA Kings and you rely on that, and now you're chasing the game and need to generate offense, it can be a little bit tougher to generate offense from that kind of defensive structure. So for sure it does. And the statistics, Pierre, show over the last 3 years, I mean, in the 17 games that these two teams have gone head-to-head over the last 3 playoff years, the team that scores first has won 15 of those games. So first goal is absolutely critical.
I know, and it sounds so cliche, but there is no greater contrast in playing styles in the Stanley Cup playoffs again this year than LA versus Edmonton. It's just a reality where both teams are trying to impose their DNA, their style on the other team, and the first goal has such a dramatic effect on it. It's unbelievable. As does special teams, by the way. That's the other side. But when you talk to the Kings players this morning here, as we did, from Drew Doughty to Mikey Anderson to Philip Deneau, they felt really good about their 5-on-5 game from Game 4. And they feel like if they duplicate that 5-on-5 game, stay out of the box, they can pull off a Game 5 win here and stretch this to 6.
Yeah, and everybody wants the first goal, but there was also the caveat, Gino, because nobody wants to say it's absolutely critical, because then if they give up the first goal, then you're in a panic. So they all say, but it's not the be-all, end-all. Like, we're still going to be okay if we don't get the first goal, although the stats would dictate you're probably not going to be okay if you don't get the first goal.
I'll tell you what, though, it's been really impressive what the Kings have been able to do. The Oilers averaging over 5 goals a game through the first 3 games, but then just 1 last game. So whatever the Kings are doing, despite the fact the Oilers are trying to knock them off kilter, the Kings are still playing some solid D and really stifling one of the best offensive teams in the entire NHL right now.
5-on-5, they've been just as good, if not better, than Edmonton for large stretches of this series, even in the games they've lost. It's just that they've run into trouble with the best power play maybe ever in the history of the NHL. I mean, that's really what the series is about. They're getting clobbered on special teams. And they also can't score themselves when they're with the man advantage, so it's a double whammy. In fact, I was talking to one Kings player today that said not only is their power play struggling, but it actually kind of hurts their momentum when they come off it. It almost feeds back into Edmonton. So 5-on-5, and the other night there was only 1 penalty call on each team. That's a beautiful recipe for the LA Kings to pull off an upset here tonight if they can get that standard of officiating again. The Oilers would like to see a lot of penalties because they're comfortable with that.
It's kind of the game within the game too, right? There's these little things that happen out on the ice. So there's all the stuff that happens after the whistle. If you recall, a couple of games ago, the ref just started firing guys out of the game, just handed out misconducts like they were 2-minute minors. And Mikey Anderson told us today, Gino, that if you remember last game, there was almost nothing after the whistle, no scrums, no nothing. And he said he feels the refs doing that kind of resonated. Guys didn't want to take the extra, and so they were a little bit more careful. The other thing that I think has been kind of interesting, there's been some video that has surfaced of players mic'd up, and in particular, Drew Doughty. So during the commercial breaks, Gino, Oiler players are going over to talk to the officials, right? Evander Kane went over to talk to the officials because he was upset that he didn't get the Slewfoot call. And Drew Doughty just beelines right over there and sticks his face in on the conversation and listens in. And there was a video surfaced of Drew Doughty. Kane was complaining about the Slewfoot, and Doughty's going, "You do that every time, Kaner. You know you do that every time." So I asked Doughty about that today, and he's like, "Yeah, that's my job." Like, there is the game within the game. There's the jockeying for position. There is the little tactical game with the officials. And Doughty is excellent at it, Pierre. He sticks his nose in there, and he says, I got to make sure there are no untruths being told.
And because the officiating is such an important part of the series, and we just described why. But on top of that, I saw Rod Pasma this morning here at Rogers Place, the series supervisor for this playoff series. He was meeting with both the Oilers and the Kings. He's not allowed to say what's in those conversations, but I can predict what was said. I can predict that Jim Hiller and Rob Blake of the Kings said, you know what, that last game, 1 penalty in each team, that was perfect. Let's stick with that. And I bet you that Chris Knobloch and Ken Holland said, really? Just 1 penalty slowing down our big guns? Come on now. So
Chris Knobloch is known, though, in the early days here, being pretty subtle in these meetings. I think Jay Woodcroft was big into advocating heavily.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily get the sense that Knobloch is the same way.
No, I think he's a lot more zen about these things. But nevertheless, it's a guarantee that the fact that there were so many penalties in the first 3 games and only 2 in the last game would have been a topic in those meetings today with the series supervisor, no doubt.
I love when we get the mic'd up sound in the games. It's always amazing. I've seen the sound that you're talking about between Kane and Doughty and the officials, and it's pure gold, which I'm really impressed. There's still, you had the conversation with Doughty about that. I'm impressed that the guys are still pretty relaxed and there's still some levity in the room, despite how much is on the line right now in the playoffs. I saw the conversation you had with Zach Hyman. You were part of a conversation with Zach Hyman talking about the stuff Shaq did during the NHL coverage stateside. Why don't you share the story about how Hyman reacted to that and how that all unfolded?
Well, yeah, I mean, Hyman, everybody saw Shaq on set, right? And Shaq Hyman, that whole bit. Obviously, that's going to get back to Zach Hyman, so he heard about that, all of his family and everybody, they were all laughing about it. But Hyman was really easygoing today, right? Really relaxed. And, Gino, I think maybe to your point here, if you look at the players that speak on a day like today, so if you're the LA Kings, you're rolling Drew Doughty out today because he's going to sit and he's going to be calm and he's going to be honest, but he's going to have levity in some of his answers, which he did. Hyman, the same thing. Some funny answers when it came to Shaquille O'Neal. These are the guys that you want setting the tone for the game today. Now, what does that mean to the rest of the players? Not much. But certainly the tone that's coming from these teams publicly after these availabilities. Matthias Ekholm talked today too, right? Calm across the board.
A lot of leadership in both rooms. So from that perspective, I think that evens out on these two teams. But there's a lot at stake here, I think, tonight for the Edmonton Oilers. We talked about this off air, Ryan. I can't, say this enough with emphasis. The Oilers winning tonight and getting out of here in the first round with only 5 games against LA after playing 6 last year, 7 games the year before. When you're a serious Stanley Cup contender and you intend to play deep into June, you need 1 or 2 short series in your path. It's really difficult to go 7-7-7. The grinding aspect of that, the energy levels, the injuries. This is huge for Edmonton. They can't allow themselves to get dragged into a longer fight here with LA, which is a physical team, because you want to have your eye on the prize for next round and so on. So that's what's at stake here.
Well, and especially when you consider, Gino, that other series, the travel in that series, Vancouver to Nashville, is brutal. So the Oilers would love to put this thing to bed tonight, put their feet up tomorrow and say, let's go Nashville, at least for one more game, hoping for 7 in the other series because the travel is nasty over there.
Yeah, because the Canucks couldn't clinch. Now they've got to tack on about another 8,000 kilometers of travel, which is just going to, physically, that's going to wear on them so much. Pierre, you mentioned the power play, and I thought you wrote an interesting article for The Athletic talking about what it's like to have to face the Edmonton Oilers power play. It's clicking at over 53% right now. That's just crazy. This offense is nuts. They only had 1 opportunity last game. They scored on it, and that was the difference in the game. When you were talking to guys who have been around the league for years, what are they seeing from this Oilers power play, other than the obvious that there's incredible skill set on the power play, that's making it so hard to shut down right now?
Yeah, I really enjoyed putting that piece together because of the voices that were involved. I mean, Patrice Bergeron, who won 6 Selke trophies, started the conversation by saying, yeah, holy moly, I don't know what I'd do if I was out there. And this is Patrice Bergeron and Dave Tippett, Ken Hitchcock, Guy Carbonneau, 3-time Selke trophy winner, Craig Berube, Gerard Gallant. These are all really smart hockey people who understand the art of penalty killing. And they basically said they've never seen anything quite like this. Although Tippett and Hitchcock said the one power play that they remember being like this one was the early 90s Penguins power play with Mario Lemieux and Paul Coffey and Jaromir Jagr, etc. It's elite company. And the point that they all made, and Ryan gets to see this power play all year long, is that there's so much movement on this power play that Patrice Bergeron said usually he would watch a power play and they would have a penalty killing meeting and have notes on tendencies and where to be on the ice. He says you can't do it with this Oilers power play. They come at you with such different angles and movement with McDavid and Draisaitl. Then, of course, if you cheat towards Bouchard or Hyman, then someone else is open. Basically, the lesson from all these guys, good luck, stay out of the box.
The common denominator for me to why they're able to function at the level they are is because they have incredibly sure-handed players, but they're sure-handed with their heads up. That's the high skill level, right? Connor McDavid handles a puck and he's just looking around. Leon Draisaitl, same thing. Evan Bouchard, we're seeing him uncork huge one-timers. He doesn't even look at the puck to track it. The linchpin, though, is Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. We're talking about a first overall pick.
Right.
He is so sure-handed every time he gets it with their heads on a swivel. Everybody that handles the puck on that power play has amazing hands and is sure-handed. And then you got Zach Hyman being the backboard in front of the net.
Yeah, and so pick your poison, as these guys said, but it's difficult. Which one do you leave out? And Craig Berube said, honestly, he might just leave Hyman to the goalie and focus on McDavid, Draisaitl, and Bouchard, which is kind of crazy because Hyman makes a living scoring from there. But the point is you can't cover all these options. Two other things. One is Ken Hitchcock said they win every single faceoff. Now, he's exaggerating, but Leon Draisaitl is at 83% in this series on the power play in the faceoff. So they start with the puck. Number two is, and all of these guys mentioned this, Connor McDavid is a unicorn in terms of zone entries on the power play. He can barely defend it. Most teams, half the battle is just trying to get in the zone on zone entries. McDavid just skates it in, and you can't. If you stop him, you take a penalty. So those things alone are huge advantages in terms of how he's setting up.
McDavid gets the zone over to Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and with those sure hands, always makes a smart play.
It ain't easy facing the Oilers, but the LA Kings have overcome 3-1 deficits in the past. Twice before. In 1989, when Wayne Gretzky and the LA Kings turned it around. And then again in 2014, they were down 3-1 to the San Jose Sharks. Kings came back to win that series in the opening round, and then they went on to win the Stanley Cup. But that was not against the Edmonton Oilers, which is a whole different ballgame. Our thanks to Ryan Rishaug and Pierre LeBrun in Edmonton, teeing up tonight's game between the Oilers and the Kings.